I remember like sitting there and being like, do we have any research on the audience? And like everybody looked at me like I had 3 heads.
Welcome to the Truly Social Podcast, recorded in the booming metropolis of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Home of Drake, Margaret Atwood, you know, the person behind Hulu's smash hit Handmaid's Tale, and crippling self-doubt.
Every week, or so we aim for, we deep dive into the topics that make social, well, social. From community to content, influencers to interest graphs, metrics to memes, and everything in between, we're on a mission to get social back on track. As for your hosts, I'm Tara Hunt.
And I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And this is Truly Social.
All right, so this week we're going to talk about why the agency model is broken. And it's also in tie-in with one of Tara's videos that will be out maybe or before or after this podcast.
We're still figuring out the timing of all of that, so hold tight while we do that.
Yes. So if you want to just keep track, just make sure you subscribe to Truly Social's YouTube channel. So this week, we're going to talk about the agency model and why it's broken. And just to give you a little bit of my perspective is that, I worked for almost 15 years in agencies. That's where I learned my ropes. I went from the bottom to the middle until I left. And, I found a lot of things frustrating, and maybe it's because of my not sort of like understanding the industry, but after leaving it, I sort of saw a little bit of the client relationship and how that worked as well. And, because before I only had the agency's perspective, and then for the past 5 years, I was the client side, and now I have the client's perspective. So I definitely have a much more of a rounded approach into this. And, I think we sort of need to talk about, why it's broken. And we're going to talk about like a couple of different ways that it's broken according to our perspective.
Yeah, I also want to, my own history with agencies. I have worked at agencies, big and small, both, creative, advertising, and PR. I've worked on client side. I've also been a client of agencies, running my own company, and now we're running an agency. Exactly. So I have a lot of different perspectives on this thing that we are talking about today. Now, I do want to preface it as well to talk a little bit about the state of agencies. I think we hear a lot of reports and we see a lot of hand-wringing around agencies being in trouble and in decline. And it's true in many ways that the industry is not what it used to be. It used to be that big companies would get their AORs, or agencies of record, where they would push lots and lots of money, basically their entire marketing budget through. And those agencies were living a bit of a heyday. Mm-hmm. And as marketing has evolved, more specialized agencies came up, which gobbled away at the big AOR model, first and foremost. And then we've seen a shift also in the past couple of years with more and more brands creating agencies in-house and bringing a lot of their marketing in-house, therefore cutting out agencies altogether. So these big AORs are in a bit of a panic in that they are still sort of stuck in that old paradigm, and the cycle that used to happen where they would just gobble up any sort of the incumbent, they would all the newbies coming into the sphere is kind of not as happening as much either, because they don't have the deep pockets that they used to. And I've actually seen more and more brands and clients buying the smaller agencies rather than big agencies buying small agencies. It's a
Very
really
true.
interesting evolution. So all this to say is that, agencies are in trouble. The reasons that we're going to talk about today aren't the only reasons they're in trouble, but it's definitely something that contributes to burnout in agencies, which we're definitely trying to avoid at Truly Social.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about 3 things that Tara also addresses in the video that we feel sort of like, need to be improved when it comes to agencies and why we think that sort of model is broken. The first one being the client relationship. In the past, or from my experience in the past, like the client would give us a brief, a budget, and then, we'd work together on the creative, and then, the campaign would be bought and launched, and then we'd follow up in a month, and then, see how it worked, or 3 months, see how it worked, right? And that just doesn't work anymore, right? It is a lot of information missing. There's a lot of communication missing. The only times we would get in touch with the client would be like, when something wasn't going right. The follow-up wasn't sort of like as, the communication was definitely lacking on that side of things. And
yeah. Well, I found definitely when I was at agencies, there was always a bit of a us versus them, and there's like plenty of evidence that this is pretty industry-wide. So there's like that amazing blog, Clients from Hell. There's a few like this, but making fun of the kind of quote unquote ridiculous things that clients ask for. And I have to admit, like, I have been on that side and like totally face palming when we get certain requests that are pretty common, like, can you make the logo larger? Or I want less. They'll ask for something like, I want less color, but still with lots of color. Like they're like asking crazy questions on the design side. Another issue was always like these briefs that were too brief or like not quite well enough thought out. But then, the communication from the client is, that has always been a problem. But then on the agency side too, there is a certain, like, I don't know how to describe it, but agencies themselves had this sort of negative viewpoint, this negative approach to client relationships where they were always smarter than the clients or knew more than the clients or, that sort of thing. So, and because they didn't talk on a regular basis, because the agency didn't get embedded in the client's
day to day.
Yeah, exactly. There was just like a lack of trust and understanding that broke down.
Yeah. And it sort of brings back to something I mentioned in another podcast is sort of like, when I was in the last, almost 10 years in agency doing media buying and getting to the web, it was really hard to get any data from the client, right? And, just the basic Google Analytics was almost impossible to get. They didn't understand it and all that sort of stuff back then. But even now, to this day, like I still have to jump through a lot of hoops to install a pixel. Right. And, I just this week had a call with Google AdWords and they were like, okay, can you install this pixel? I was like, okay, well, you need to send me the instructions that I need to send to the client. And then I send the email to the client and I don't hear back for, a week and stuff like that. In this time, there's advertising going out. There's no tracking happening, all that sort of stuff. And that's sort of like a lack of, I don't know if it's a lack of trust or sort of just not understanding the level of access that an agency needs to really understand your what you're dealing with and what you need to sort of like your goals, right? And it goes on both sides, and I think it's a question of education as well. One of the things that we've seen these digital platforms doing, and in a way, the reason why they're winning, is because they do try to educate people and educate the clients, right, as much as possible in terms of how to use their platforms. Yeah. And I remember in a day, agency would be like, this was Google before Facebook, but like Google would definitely try to circumvent the agency and try to get in touch with the client and educate the client much more than the agency would. Right. And, it ended up happening. And it's like, now a lot of clients handle their Google AdWords in home or their analytics in-house, right? Yeah. And it's advantageous to Google.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're trying to save money, and I completely understand that because agencies, can be expensive. Although we've done a bit of an assessment for various clients where if they were to hire like all of the components that we bring into a project, that they would probably spend a lot more, especially if those people were full-time, and it's hard to find part-time people that are invested as well. So, the big lesson, I think, with the agency client relationship being broken is to get like more embedded into your client's day to day. This is what we try to do. It doesn't always work out well, right? There are clients that we have that have been indoctrinated to that old school model where they send us a brief, they want to just send us something and ask for it and then us to do it and not have any conversations in between. Like, it's like push off here to you and, come back when you have a finished product. We don't like to work that way. And I don't work very well that way. And we may be irritating to those clients because, we're constantly like sending them messages. But, some of the things that we do to try to build up those relationships is a lot of our clients are definitely the smaller, more nimble clients have Slack. And so we try to either get them on Slack or get onto their Slack.
So just in case you don't know what Slack is, Slack is a sort of business messaging service. Then you can add Slack channels. You can have a direct connection between you and your client. It avoids the back and forth of emails. Good
idea to describe it because we shouldn't assume that everybody in the world knows what Slack is. So that, has been hugely advantageous. I have, in the early days of Truly Social, when it was, just myself and a few others, like we would go and embed ourselves, especially at a busy time, a crunch time, into our clients' offices for like a couple of days here and there, just to make sure that we were overhearing and available. And, inevitably, like the client would be like, oh, yeah, please, there's a desk, but we're going to be really busy. But like inevitably, I would be pulled into meetings all day, every day that I was there, to get my opinion on things or see what the social angle is on something. And it became this really great way to know what was top of mind for the client, as well as for them to see that bringing, a social perspective into all of the elements of their business was a good idea. So the agency client model needs to be fixed. And I think a lot of that has to do with like opening up more frequent lines of communication and making sure that we have more of a view into the day-to-day, and the client also has more of a view into our day-to-day, right? So that we don't just go away, do something and bring back the finished product. That, we also on the opposite end bring the client in during the building of something as well. So the second one, do you want to describe what the second issue is?
The second one is how agencies pitch to clients and how the pitch process is broken. Again, like I'm back into the agency world after a little bit of a break, and still seeing the same things happening right now is that, clients comes in, say, we want to work with you. Can you pitch us your ideas? And, you get what we call
RFP.
An RFP.
Request for proposal.
Yeah. There's sort of like this competition between agencies to bring the best idea up front. So when I was in agency world, this would be like, 1 week, 3 weeks, 1 month of hell, because during that period, like tons of people would be sort of monopolized in the agency to do all the research, to come up with like the most amazing creative strategy for a new client, right? Because the new business is important and all that sort of stuff. And that took away so many resources, and actually in a way also took away resources from other clients, right? So, and at the end of the day, the clients would get these ideas presented to them and a pitch deck with all these ideas that technically they could just leave and go to another agency or try try to do themselves.
Yeah.
And which isn't necessarily, it's obviously from the client's perspective is great. But from the agency perspective, you just lost a lot of bandwidth and a lot of man hours to do this. And it ends up costing a lot of money.
And potentially pissed off your current clients that are paying you for that sort of.
And, coming into one of the things that I was always amazed and, while I was in the sidelines looking how Tara was pitching clients for Truly Social is that she has a completely different way of pitching it. And I think it's a very valuable way because it gives value to the client and it's not a waste of time for the agency. Yeah.
So I always thought the RFP model was, it wasn't great for the client. It wasn't great for the agency and it wasn't great for the client. And so you've already described how it wasn't great for the agency. It leads to burnout and people work crazy hours for those pitches. And then at the end of the day, they could not win it. And so there's they probably just spent $20,000 on that pitch and nothing is going to come of it. And then, but it's also not great for the client because that kind of rushed research and strategy does not lead to good planning.
Yeah.
It does not lead to good outcomes. So I've been part of the pitch creation process where I walked in and this happened at several agencies. It wasn't only just one. Where they would be we're getting together to have a meeting and go over this pitch and do a brainstorm. And so we'd all gather in the boardroom. The person who had the pitch would kind of read out the RFP and the parameters around it. And then everybody was okay, so what are your ideas? What are the ideas that you could bring to this? And I remember sitting there and being do we have any research on the audience? And everybody looked at me I had three heads. I was well, we have to bring insights into the audience to this. Mm-hmm. Otherwise the ideas are just they're generic. They're not specific to this audience. And this happened at a bunch of different agencies. And I actually, one of the things that I brought to these agencies that I worked at was more of this discipline around strategy and insights. Now, the problem is I still had 2 days to come up with these insights. And sometimes, you can come across an insight quickly, but mostly you can't. So the person would send me the RFP, say we have a meeting in 2 days, brainstorm about this in 2 days. What insights can you bring? And I would throw every tool that I had at it, work 12-hour days, 14-hour days to just focus in on the research to try to pull out some insights that were usable for the meeting so that when the meeting happened, the RFP would be read out and then I would stand up and be okay, and here's some insights into the audience. Now, what are your ideas that relate to this audience? Which would, it actually it still wasn't perfect because there were probably deeper insights and I wasn't able to always validate. But, a couple of these campaigns became award-winning in these agencies. So one that we did for Pantene for Procter & Gamble won an award. And then also previous to that, there was one that we did for, it was a men's shaving foam that made the hair fall off your face. I can't remember. Anyways, the insight there was that their audience were into gaming, so they could create a game.
Yeah.
Anyways, and both of them won awards and were really, really successful at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's also touches back on the previous point is sort of keeping that communication going with the client, right? And sort of understanding what they're dealing with. Sometimes the client doesn't give you all the information that you really need, right? And it takes a lot of prodding from us to sort of get more information. And sometimes, for even agencies, and I would assume other agencies as well, it's sort of we end up presenting something about the insights that we see, and the client's yeah, we knew that. And I was well, why didn't you tell us?
Yeah.
That would have saved us a lot of time. And we could have like dived deeper into that, focused into that, and sort of found more insights that you haven't thought about, right? So the idea of the pitch needs to be a collaborative pitch. And for us, because I'm new to the agency and I'm learning your process of doing this, I'm fascinated that there's like touch bases with the clients that we're, like every couple of weeks as we work on a pitch, we're like, okay, this is the path we're going towards. How do you feel about this? And, are we going the right path? The client's showing us what they're doing on their side of marketing as well, who they're talking to. And, it's a collaborative process to make sure everybody's happy. The thing that, again, that's the most surprising to me for our process is that we're not doing this for free.
No.
So,
God, no. This is like a core to our business, right? Is like we spend like close to $100,000, maybe more even. I don't know. I'd have to ask the accountant on per year on insights tools. Yeah. This is like, there's no way I'm giving that shit away for free. First of all, like it would break us.
Yeah.
But also like we, that was Lizzie. She
didn't like that part about spending money.
Sorry, our pugs are in every one of these podcasts as well. But yeah, so like that's one part. Also, our current clients are very important, and I do not want to take time away from them. So like you're going to pay for the time so that we can bring in potentially more people or external researchers, that sort of thing, to help put the research together. And we take time. Yep. Like we tell them 6 to 8 weeks for the research alone. And then we build a strategy on top of that, which is another 3 to 4 weeks.
Again, and sort of like, our process, and not to be tooting our own horn on it, but I think it's a smart process, is that, at the end of the pitch process, the client leaves with a fully baked strategy that they can take to another agency if they want, or they can take it internally if they want. For the most part, for us, like we're left with like, at least they paid us for the work. And, we both sort of learned as well. And, like if they want to work with us, everybody has a good relationship. We don't think negatively of the client who just takes the ideas and just executes it somewhere else. And, it just, for us, it's been very beneficial. And, as somebody who's new here, Tara has much more of the insights of how it's worked so far. But I believe it's a great model.
Well, I don't even give them a choice, really. Like sometimes I'll recognize if it's like a startup, for instance, and they have super tiny budget in general, we will do a bit of a truncated version, like a smaller version that isn't at like 8 weeks, 12 weeks long. But we're also the spend and the risk is of, what we're doing when we go to implement is not as high either, right? So I will say like, okay, so we're still going to need 3 to 4 weeks to do the research and the strategy. We're going to focus more on insights into a particular audience that we pick that is based on who your current audience is, and then target from find the right platforms and messages and stuff from there. The RFPs are set up in a way that it is not beneficial at the end of the day to either agency or client.
Yeah. And we'll sort of end it on that one when it comes to the second one. And then, sort of want to go through the last sort of thing that you addressed in the video is the continuation of the strategy. And, one of the things that many brands still do is they still think on a campaign level. Yeah. And they still execute on a campaign level. It's, 3 months, 6 months, and then we're done, right? And
moving on.
And moving on, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is like, it just creates no sort of like relationship with a product, with a brand, and it sort of eliminate every single time there's a new sort of like messaging and, is it the same company, all that sort of stuff. And, one of the things that again, sort of my old life, I remember thinking is like when people are searching for stuff, again, I worked as a search engine marketer, and it's like, why do we have campaigns only when the campaign's live? We should have the campaign going, the search marketing campaign going 24/7, 365 days a year, right? And how, basically how come we're not doing that? Well, because we're, stuck to the campaign budget. That's it. Educating the client that the internet does not turn off. Right?
Yeah.
having constant presence, even on, like, we're sort of bringing it back to social. Social is a completely different animal. It's like people are always on it, and they're on it on vacation, and they're on it like during the holidays and all that sort of stuff. If you're only present and only back and forth with your audience during campaign period, well, that's not really going to create a relationship.
Well, the campaign-based thinking is a hangover from the previous one-way medium, like advertising era of things, the military-industrial complex thing, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it's not a social thing. Yeah. So one of the things that we tell our clients is, yeah, you might have like a persona or something set up that is based on advertising. You might have these calendars set up that are based on what they call tentpole events, but social is evergreen. Social is about building relationships. I always say like step back and think about how social is in your personal life. Mm-hmm. The deepest relationships, the best relationships that you have are ones that are consistently fed. Mm-hmm. The ones that you see people on a regular basis, you talk on a regular basis, you hang out on a regular basis. And the lighter weight ones that are like not necessarily as deep and as strong are people you run into at a party or you
don't remember their name.
Yeah, you don't remember their names, or you're like, oh shoot, I know somebody that does that. I should reach out, and you only like really reach out when you need something from them, or like they come up in some sort of conversation. These aren't like close, deep relationships. I think these relationships are very transitional, and brands. You can argue as to whether brands can be truly social and whether you do have a relationship with brands. But I would say, yes, there are brands that we have relationships with. Yeah. We do have they're not the same relationship as your BFF, like people to people, but they are relationships that you have with brands, and there's trust, which is part of a relationship. There is loyalty, which is part of a relationship. There is a willingness to have a conversation with them. And forgive and forget and all that stuff, right? So investing in those relationships is really important, and it's important for a bunch of different reasons. Like, number one, on the forgive and forget level, if a brand that you have a strong relationship with and trust and have those like deeper ties with screws up, you are like way more willing, and like if there's more people around you that have that same relationship, you're all more willing to like give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, let's let you talk about how you screwed up. Okay, and now we move on. Versus if you're a brand who does not build those relationships, people are waiting for you to screw up. Yeah. They totally they can't wait to take you down. Like, that becomes a liability. And then also, Apple built a lot of trust over the years. I think now, and that's, they had other kinds of consistency, right? It wasn't just campaigns and ads and stuff, but they had a consistency in the way that they built relationships with their customers. They created Apple Store early on. Their customer service was huge, customer service, the Apple Care, all of that stuff, like all of these different ways. And this is all social, by the way. It doesn't necessarily mean social media. Yeah. Like, it wasn't campaign based for them. Like, they had campaigns, but they also had this string that went through everything that was deeply embedded in who they were. And now I think, though, since Steve Jobs' demise, I feel like they have lost their way, and they're eroding a lot of that. Yeah, it feels it's slowly, very drippily eroding, right? Yeah, and because of that, still have it, they're not listening to the audience, right? They're not keeping that continuity. Like, it's like they took away all of our ports because it's the future, but I don't think that would have happened in the previous era. There was like iterations that were and decisions that were made from listening and interacting and having those relationships, deep relationships with the audience, that if they continue to have that now with, the decisions that they've made, now they're forcing their audience to change, where like before it was like, it was like they were paving cow paths before. And now they're like, no, cows, you have to walk there. And the cows are like, I don't want to walk over there. You know, the continuity is really important. The continuity is important for a whole bunch of reasons in the social era, but it was important before.
Yeah.
But now it's especially important.
Well, I think now it was important before, but now it's sort of like we see it, right? We can see it in social media. We see it. We have straight up connections with the brands, right? Yeah. So, you know, and if they're not engaged with you, and, you know, I see it very well executed these days with like content creators, right? Who, you know, sometimes some of them get really popular, right? And, you know, they can be YouTubers, podcasters, and writers. And, you know, I'm an insignificant person tweeting at them. And it's like, you know, I get the likes back, I get the replies back. And I, you know, and they understand that they're building that relationship in a way so that, you know, we stay loyal to them and we keep watching their content, right? And that's, you know, that's again, a lesson that can be brought to brands in that perspective.
Yeah. And so like campaigns are fine. Have campaigns, have launches, push things out, but also like the problem with agency thinking and the agency model is it was all like mandate driven. It was like you would sprint towards something and then nothing, and then you would scrap it. Like so many cool things that have been done in the past by brands that as soon as the campaign is over, it's gone, right? Like Art of the Trench, Burberry had done this Art of the Trench, and then like when that was over, they just canned it. Yeah. You know, like you had all these people submitting user-generated content. Like they took the pictures, they took the time to take pictures and submit it. It wasn't even like, I'm going to tag it on Instagram. It was like, I'm going to submit it to this site. And then they kill it.
And a more closer to home example is Montreal tourism, Montreal moments, right? A few years ago, they had this thing with like on social media where, you know, you would tag Montreal moments, right? And it's like to this day, people still tag Montreal moments, but Montreal tourism is beyond that. They've gone.
Oh, they've got to the next campaign.
Right? The next branding, the next this, right? And so like, well, there's still people there, and you could have just amplified that message, and it would have like grown with time, right?
Yeah. Well, the agencies are always wanting something new. And it's like, well, sometimes the most exciting thing for the audience is not new. It's building on what you already have. Yeah. And I think that's an important lesson. So that's, you know, that's just another way in which the agency model is broken, in our humble opinion.
Exactly.
If there are any
H does mean humble, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that came up on BuzzFeed this week. It was hilarious. I don't think there was an argument in our office. Everybody agreed humble.
Yeah. I think that was a fake BuzzFeed thing.
Oh, yeah. And they meant to start a riot.
Yeah.
I think, you know, that's a good place to end and just maybe ask people how you think the agency model is broken. If you're at agencies, if you've been at agencies, if you worked with agencies, what are the other ways in which the agency model is broken? I can think of like a few other things off the top of my head, like that they're all run by the same guy.
Well, I mean, I think there's other things we didn't talk about, right? There's commitments, right? And one of the things that we don't have is commitments with media platforms, right?
Right.
And that forces a lot of things, you know, when it comes to.
Well, let's talk about that quickly, because I think that is important. Is the way that advertising platforms and agencies work together.
Well, it's a path that like Google ended up breaking, right? Every year we sit down with X big media company and say, okay, we're planning $5 million of ads next year. We can give you 2 of that. What's the best price you can give us for the whole year? And then we'd have that bucket for the year, and we'd have to hit that bucket, or else at the end of the year we'd get penalized, right? And that's a deal between the agency and the media platform. Right. Well, it's like that doesn't necessarily mean at the end of the day you end up placing ads on sites and on platforms that aren't really beneficial to the client, right? And you know, just because you need to hit that quota, right? And to this day that still happens.
So the strategy is driven by this deal that you have behind the scenes.
Exactly, right? And it still happens, right? It still happens to this day, and these are what, the oaths of this world do. And I'm pretty sure Facebook does it, right? Facebook does it and Google does it, but at different levels, right? At, YouTube levels, at partnership levels, all that sort of stuff. But
what's an oath?
Oath is what Yahoo is now.
Oh, how did I miss that? Yahoo's become so irrelevant to me and my social world that I don't even pay attention.
Exactly. So that to me, that's a huge thing that I love the fact that, in a way, digital has sort of broken that, the self-serving platforms have sort of broken that because it's still there. It still happens, right? It still happens and agencies are still trying to do it. And, it's the race to the lowest cost. Right. But still keeping those margins with the clients. Well,
and I mean, this also, it shows like how we work differently and how that penalizes us too. So just an FYI, we are so collaborative with our clients that we set up their ad platforms on Facebook and Twitter and all these different platforms. We create a strategy that's best for them, giving them sort of that media mix of like where they should be boosting their content that we're doing with them. But we like set them up so that they can go in anytime, they can run it. It's under their like management. And so we run into the issue because we have kind of like smaller spends on each. If you culminated them together, we would be a rather sizable client for Facebook. Yeah. But because they're all broken apart, Facebook sees us as a non-player and it's all under the client's name. So when we contact Facebook because we have an issue because they've declined an ad or they've like something's gone wrong with the account, like we don't get priority service. We don't get somebody on the phone. We have to like go through this like antiquated system and like it's just it's a lot of hoops and takes us a lot of time to fix something. And every time we've asked for a rep, they take a look at our inventory and they're like,
you're not spending enough for us to give you a rep.
But we are. I mean, like you put it all together, we're probably spending like $50,000 a month, which is pretty decent. Yeah. For a small agency.
For a small agency, yeah.
Yeah, for a small agency, we're no
we're not a media buying agency, so
but we're big enough that Facebook we should be getting. I think we've crossed that. I think 10,000 is this threshold or something for crossing to get your own rep. Yeah, we've definitely crossed that, but they don't see that. So the problem is that we're being penalized for creating a strategy that works for
the platforms, actually.
For the clients and for the for the audience.
No, but the thing again, my argument here is that we're bridging that communication. Yeah, okay, you're right. I'm not saying against what you're doing, but it's like we're also bridging that communication between the platforms and the client, right? Yeah. And the thing is, the platforms don't acknowledge that. And because again, the client on its own looks like a small client and they're not going to help, sort of like really help you that much. But at the same time, it's like if we had an agent, that would talk to us and say, hey, can you help, this client, he might be spending more money, right? Whereas all that sort of stuff. And, the reps that we do get in touch with come to us and say, well, we can't really help you unless you spend this amount of money. Well, it's like, okay, well, you're not doing anything to help us educate the client on, why we should be spending that amount of money. Anyways, either
way, I just think like our model is really focused on like creating the exact right strategy that will connect the client with their audience. And so the way that these platforms are set up penalizes us, makes like that's another way in which the agency model is broken in that they're creating strategies that benefit the agency and the platform, but not the client and the audience. Mm-hmm. And we're, hope maybe we can bang on some drums and see if we can change that.
That was awesome. Thanks for listening. Let us know what you think.
And how the agency model is broken in your humble opinion.
Exactly.
All right, so it's now come time for that segment called Truly Social Heroes, which we are adding to the end of each podcast that highlights people that we follow who we think are actually truly social. This means that they're doing stuff that they love, creating content that's fun and engaging to watch or listen to, and who interact beautifully with their tribe online. So, Carlos, Who is your truly social hero this week?
My truly social hero this week is a woman called Elle of the Mills. She is a YouTuber from Ottawa, Canada, and she's probably one of the most creative YouTubers I've seen since Casey Neistat jumped into the scene. When Casey Neistat jumped into the scene, he brought YouTubing to another level, and everybody else sort of like gave up or followed his path, right? And about 6 months ago, Casey mentioned that he was inspired by her. So I started looking at her, and she is a young creator that just brings a completely like new way of sort of, you know, telling stories, very dynamic stories of what happens in her life. Obviously, she's hilarious, but it's just the way she sort of like shoots her videos. They're almost like mini episodes. It feels like a sitcom in a way. She's just taking the production of her videos beyond anybody else's way of doing it. And it looks easy. Obviously it takes some work, but like she's been really raw in what's happening in her life, from coming out to, you know, doing crazy things just for a joke. The way she films her content is just so refreshing and so entertaining compared to most YouTubers. People are trying to vlog their lives, which is a little bit of a old school thinking on YouTube now, and it doesn't really work anymore. You need to bring another level of creativity, and she's just want another level up that sort of shows, you know, how this platform is maturing in terms of storytelling.
Awesome. So mine this week is somebody that I completely fell in love with on Instagram, but she has since spread across multiple platforms, and her name is Celeste Barber. Now, you might be familiar with her. You might have seen her images. They are hilarious. She is Australian. She's an Australian comedian. Right now, I do believe she's even doing a tour, stand-up tour across America. She started to mock the Instagram models, recreate in a very real person way these scenarios that they're putting together. I think the first image that I saw highlighted that made me laugh really hard was when a specific Instagram model had shown a picture of them doing a yoga on a surfboard. So what she does is she like juxtaposes these pictures. So the picture on the surfboard is showing, and then she has her picture below it where basically it's like the splash moment where she's falling off of her surfboard, showing like this is the setup, but this is what happens in real life. It's hilarious. It's relatable. It is a wonderful commentary on this idea of creating this like aspirational life on these platforms. She does it with so much humor and style. She also has really great Instagram stories, which I love. She's so real. She talks about, you know, right now she's going on her tour. She's telling the story behind the scenes. I think, you know, her husband is totally in love with LA. So she makes fun of the fact that he's like really gleeful of it. She's just enjoying the hell out of life. I think this all took her by surprise as well, but she's become a huge inspiration to us all. Her hashtag is challenge accepted, I think she uses, or Celeste challenge accepted, when she comes across one of these images and recreates them, and has definitely inspired a lot of people to do the same. It not only is great content and entertaining, but she is like super engaging and truly social.
We really hope you enjoyed this week's topic.
If you did enjoy it, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at @trulysocial, @Miss Rogue, GUE, and or at Carlos Pacheco, that's CarlosPache_CO, with your own insights. If you did not enjoy it, tell us why too. We do love feedback. And if you want to argue one of our points, bring it.
Also, please go over to iTunes or whatever podcatcher you use and give us a rating and review, and pass this along to anyone you think would enjoy it.
We're also looking for guests to join us in future conversations. So if you have something you'd like to discuss or an alternative viewpoint you want to challenge us with, please do drop us a line. You can tweet us or email us at podcast@trulysocial.ca.
Until next time,
TTYS.